Hey everyone, and welcome back to Horror Movies for Life YouTube channel. I'm your host Brian, and in this video, of course, we're going to take a look at another horror anthology movie that I haven't reviewed on my channel yet, as part of my July series that you guys picked. And the movie we're going to take a look at today is kind of a follow-up to um, sort of an original movie. This goes old school, early 70s, and that movie is part of this double pack here, Vault of Horror. So yeah, Tales from the Crypt of 1972. I have seen a few times and I have reviewed on my channel. But Vault of Horror I've never seen before up until now. So we're going to go ahead and review Vault of Horror from 1973, one of the seven Amicus movies during the 60s and 70s. So let's just go ahead and get into Vault of Horror. So Vault of Horror, also known as actually it's Vault of Horror, also known as The Vault of Horror. Further Tales from the Crypt or Tales from the Crypt 2 is a 1973 British anthology horror film directed by Roy Ward Barker, who directed other Amicus movies. So basically, the premise is it opens with five strangers who board a descending lift, one by one, in a modern office block in London. They reach the sub basement, though none of them have pressed for that destination. They find a large, elaborate, furnished room that appears to be a gentleman's club. And then they all sit down, and I think there's a drink there. There's like alcohol and stuff. And then they tell their story. They tell stories about vivid dreams that they've had, and then that's how we get into our five stories. So, um, going through the stories, Midnight Mess is the first one, and this is about a guy that hires a private investigator to follow his sister, figure out where she lives, um, for reasons that I'm not going to give away here. But that has a pretty cool, ominous and eerie ending to it. I'll say I thought the ending was very effective. The next story is entitled "The Neat Job." This is about a guy who is kind of a neat freak and expects everything in his house and basically expects his wife to make sure that everything is in its place and a place for everything. And it kind of takes a turn towards the end. It's played a little bit more for humor, I would say, but especially the final shot. Um, the third story is entitled This Trick Will Kill You." This is about a couple in India, I think, or they're overseas somewhere in a country, and they're checking out all these magic tricks that are taking place, and because they do magic tricks themselves, and finally they stumble upon a woman who can get a rope to basically come out of like as she plays her flute, this rope starts to come out of this container, this basket, and then she can climb it. So of course they wanna steal the trick, and they offer money for it, and it takes kind of a dark turn, and also a very effective ending to this one. The fourth story is entitled "Bargain and Death." This is one. This story is about a guy and his friends who are going to run an insurance scam, where the one guy fakes his death and he ends up in a coffin getting buried, but his friend's supposed to spring him out and he doesn't. It doesn't quite go the way. They both are going to try to get rid of the other, basically, to get the money all to themselves. One of those deals. And then there's also a couple of college graduate guys. Um, I don't know if they're graduate or not, but college guys that are uh, paying off a gravedigger to dig up a body so that they can study from it or something. And it all kind of meets and culminates together at the end. Then the fifth and final story is entitled "Drawn and Quartered." Um, these are all, of course, from different Tales from the Crypt stories from the comic books, which I'm not really into. I'm not a big comic book guy, but I'm just pointing that out. Four of the five stories aren't actually from Vault of Horror comics; they're from Tales from the Crypt, and then one is from Shock Suspense Stories. That's the neat job. The other four stories that I mentioned are all from Tales from the Crypt, so that's kind of interesting. But like I said, I don't know much about the comic books because I've never really been into comic books. As far as the cast goes, some of the main ones here: Daniel Massey as Harold Rogers, Terry Thomas as Arthur Critchett, Kurt Jurgens as Sebastian, Michael Craig as Maitland, Tom Baker as Moore, Anna Massey as Donna Rogers, and uh, Glynis Johns as Eleanor Critchett. So yeah, that's the those are the five stories, sort of the premise of the stories. And then of course we have sort of the wrap up. You know, the after the five stories, you have the wrap up at the end, which has kind of an interesting reveal twist that I'm sure a lot of people probably weren't surprised by, especially if you watch this movie in 2025. Like a lot of movies, I think it probably held up better in 1973. But even with that said, I'll have something to say about the overall wraparound story. So, yeah, that's Vault of Horror here as part of this two-pack Midnight Movies double feature, along with my Tales from the Crypt that I have watched from the same pack. And as I said, I reviewed that on my channel maybe a couple of years ago. You'll have to search on my channel. But I do have a review for Tales from the Crypt. I just recently watched this too, a couple of months ago, and man, the stories are good in Tales from the Crypt. But let's talk about Vault of Horror, my thoughts on it. Starting with the things that I liked about the movie. And well, I don't think these five stories are quite as strong as its predecessor, Tales from the Crypt. I don't think they fall that far. I think all five stories have interesting and fairly unique premises as fairly unique premises. That doesn't sound right. Premises. No, that doesn't sound right either. They have interesting ideas, is what I'm trying to say here, and are executed pretty well. There's no duds here, though. You don't have any stories that I wouldn't watch again if I watched this movie. So I think all five stories are pretty strong, even though I do have my favorites and I have a ranking and I'm going to give at the end of this video. Very good performances across the board, as we've come to expect with Amicus movies. You have Terry Thomas, Daniel Massey, Kurt Jurgens, and Michael Craig, and Tom Baker, the best known Doctor Who, I think, the one that everybody will point to when they talk about Doctor Who. I think he does the best job with my limited experience with that series and the iterations of that series. But yeah, so you got good performances here. Um, I have to say, I really like the wraparound story. In fact, I think I like the wraparound story more in this movie than I do for Tales from the Crypt. I've never been a huge fan of the wraparound in Tales from the Crypt. It's fine. I know it has an interesting tidbit at the beginning that a lot of people don't pick up on. Something happens that has to do with kind of one of our stories and the order of things and kind of how it all plays in. So I give it credit for that. But I mean, other than them meeting the crypt keeper in the crypt, who's not the crypt keeper that I've come to know from the TV show, I just was never that enthralled with the wraparound from Tales from the Crypt. I do like the wraparound here, as I said, from Vault of Horror a bit better. It's very much in the same vein in terms of five strangers coming together, except in this time, instead of coming together in a crypt from the catacombs, they come together in this underground vault of horror. Um, from a lift, basically an elevator, if you will. They call it a lift overseas, I think, and they tell their stories. In this case, their stories is based on vivid dreams that they all have, and all trying to figure out why they're together there. So, I mean, it's a premise that's been done before, especially in Amicus. Um, like Dr. Terror's House of Horror, they're all in a train car. And here they all come down in this lift and then they meet in this, well, it doesn't appear to be a vault. It appears to be like this gentleman's club, as it says. But I don't know. I like it. I like the beginning of it. I like in between the stories, it's just the one guy taking and talking about his dream. But then the end of it, I also think is very effective. Again, a bit predictable, especially nowadays for people that watch it now for the first time. They're going to say, "Oh yeah, I saw that coming." The big twist reveal, kind of like Tales from the Crypt. As I said, I'm going to say is it's kind of in that same vein without giving too much away. So, but I liked it. I liked the fate that these main characters are dealt with here, basically, as we find out with the ultimate twist of these five characters. So yeah, really like to wrap around it. Like I said, a bit more than Tales from the Crypt. I think the score and the music used is quite effective throughout the movie, kind of like a lot of the Amicus movies once again. It really worked for me, very effective. Like Tales from the Crypt and others, these stories are all morality tales, basically, which work really well and are executed well for the most part. And then finally, the pacing overall is very good in this movie. It's only an 83-minute movie, and there wasn't really any times that I was bored or checking my watch or my phone or anything. I was kind of into all these stories and where they were going to go. I thought they were all fairly well timed out and well paced. So yeah, those are my pros for Vault of Horror. As far as cons go, as I said, I don't think the stories are quite as strong as they are from Tales from the Crypt. They're not quite as flushed out, I would say. They're not, and the biggest thing is they're just not as iconic or memorable from an individual standpoint as the five stories that were from Tales from the Crypt. Um, so it's really just in comparison to Tales from the Crypt. Kind of like Creepshow 2, I was talking about on its own. I think the stories are all very well done and effective. But when you compare it to the previous movie that it's associated with, it doesn't quite add up there. One of the stories entitled The Neat Job, the second story, is the one that doesn't seem to fit quite as well with the others in terms of our main character's evil deeds, if you will, and the morality that's involved there. In other words, his fate doesn't seem as justified as the other four main characters. That's all I'll say about that. So it was kind of a standout, not in a good way from that standpoint. Some of the effects are pretty cheesy. They don't hold up as well. Very much a product of their time. Like the end of the first story having to do with somebody's jugular being exposed. That didn't look great. Um, the kill that takes place towards the end of the second story, it's basically there's a shot that happens where basically it's just like a still shot that happens there that doesn't hold up very well. And there's some other things that throughout the other stories too where I didn't think, again, it's 1972, 73. The effects aren't going to be top notch. So I get that, but just kind of know that going in. A couple of the stories, the first one, the third one, and the fourth one specifically, I thought they could have done a better job of flushing out the characters better to allow us to know them and their motivations flushed out a bit better. I think it would have made for maybe more iconic stories, kind of like from Tales from the Crypt. They just felt a little bit, I don't want to say made up last minute, but it's just part of why these stories aren't as strong. I don't think they're as flushed out, both from a story or a character standpoint. And I think that's one area that they could have given us a bit more. Maybe made the movie 90 minutes instead of 83, and it still would have been effective. And made the stories more effective with flushing out these characters a bit more, especially their motivations. And then my final con, which I just wrote this one in, out of the seven Amicus movies, this is the one that doesn't have Peter Cushing involved at all. And I have to call that as a con because I mean Peter Cushing is just what a brilliant actor he was, and he was. I'm not going to say he was sorely missed to where it hurts this movie, but as an Amicus anthology movie, Peter Cushing has to be somewhere. So I had to write that in there as a con to this particular movie. So nothing too much. Those are my cons for Vault of Horror. As far as how I'd rank these stories, I would say The Neat Job would be number five or my least favorite, but I still like it. A Bargain in Death would be number four. Midnight Mass, the first story, would be number three. This Trick Will Kill You would be number two, mostly because of the ending, and just the magic that the magic that's involved there. And then Drawn and Quartered would actually be my favorite, number one, the last story. Um, I think if there's one story that we can kind of relate to the characters to a bit more, it's probably that one. I think a bit more time was spent on that story, and I just really like the voodoo aspect of it, and ultimately the ending of that one. I thought was very interesting how the main character reaches his demise there. So, yeah, the Neat Job, Bargain and Death, Midnight Mass, This Trick Will Kill You, and Drawn and Quartered from my least favorite to my favorite as far as Vault of Horror goes. But overall, guys, this is a good anthology. I've seen people say, "Is this the weakest Amicus anthology?" I don't know. I haven't seen all of them yet. There's still one that I need to watch. But man, if this is the weakest one, you're doing pretty well. I'm not sure it is the weakest one. I'll have to when I watch them all, I'll have to figure that out. But even the weakest one, when it comes to Amicus movies, is going to be better than most. I really like Vault of Horror, and like I said, well, I don't think it's quite as strong overall because of the stories as Tales from the Crypt from 1972. I do like the wraparound story a bit better, and I don't think the stories drop off as much, even though they're not as strong. It's not like they're bad. So I'm going to give Vault of Horror a 7.5 out of 10 overall as a horror anthology movie. 7.5 out of 10 for Vault of Horror. Go ahead and comment down below your guys' thoughts about Vault of Horror, the Amicus anthology movie from 1973, and sort of the follow-up sequel to Tales from the Crypt from 1972, although not a direct sequel necessarily, but just kind of in the same vein. So please like this video, hit the little notification bell, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Would really help me out. But with that being said, I hope everybody's doing well. I hope you're enjoying this anthology review series and you enjoyed this particular movie review. And as always, stay scared. Bye.